Hi there. In this video, we will go ahead and create a full stack application and we'll perform CRUD operations using Angular 14 and ASP.NET 6 Web API. We will use Entity Framework Core and create a new SQL Server database from the ground up. This will be a great tutorial for beginners or if you want to refresh your memory. Let me take you through the app that we'll create. We will create an employee list and perform CRUD operations, that is create, read, update, and delete on these employees. We will also add multiple components and multiple routes to our Angular application. On our home page, we will show the list of employees in a beautiful Bootstrap 5 table. Then we will have this add employee button on the top, which goes to the add employee page where we can add an employee. On successful add, we will be routed back to the employees page. We can also view this employee or any other employee by going to this view button and also able to update this employee from here. Finally, if you're not friends with this employee, we can delete them using the delete button, and that removes the employee from the database. This will be a fun tutorial and I hope you learned something from it. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this one. With that said, let's get started. Before we go ahead and create our project, it is a good thing to check the versions of .NET and Angular that we have installed on our machine. So to check the version of .NET, I will write the command .NET -- version and I will press enter. And it shows me that I have the version 6 installed on my machine. So if you don't have that, it is advisable to go to the .NET website and install the latest version, which is .NET 6 at the time of recording of this video. And the second language that we have to check is Angular. So I will write the command ng -- version and I will press enter. And it's showing me the version of Angular CLI, which is 13.2.6, and we need to update this. The version of Node that I have installed on my machine is 14.17, so it's a good practice to update Node as well, because Angular uses npm packages. So I will go ahead and install the latest Node version. Now that I have updated Node.js, I will just quickly check the version of it by writing node-v, and I am on the latest 16th version. Now it's time to update the Angular CLI, and first I will uninstall Angular CLI and then I will install the latest version because I was running into some errors otherwise. So I will first write this command. I will write npm uninstall -globally -g at Angular/CLI. And I will give both these commands in the video description down below as well, so that you can copy and paste it in your terminal. So I have uninstalled Angular CLI and I will now install the latest version. I will write this command npm install -g to install it globally at Angular/CLI at latest. So this will install the Angular CLI version 14 for us. And this has now been installed successfully. I'll quickly check the version. I will write ng -- version. Sometimes it doesn't show in the same command prompt window. So if it still shows you or it doesn't show you at all, I'll close this window and I will open a new command prompt window and I will write ng -- version. And the new command for the checking the version is ng version. So I'll say ng version. And it's loading up the version of Angular CLI and it tells me that that is 14.0.2. So our -- version doesn't work anymore. So you have to type ng version to check the latest version of Angular CLI. So hope that helps. Now that we have installed Angular CLI's latest version, we have Node.js and we have .NET version 6. It's now time to create our project. I have created a folder in which I will create my UI and the .NET Web API project. And I also have a command prompt or a terminal window open, and the terminal is pointing to the newly created folder. So in here, I will create two folders, one for the UI. So I will call this full stack.ui, and inside that I will create my Angular project. Instead of the dot, I'll just say a space, and we will browse to this folder. So cd full stack UI, and inside this folder I will create the Angular project. I will write ng new followed by the name of the project. So we will call this full stack.ui, and then I will press enter to create a new Angular 14 project. It is asking me to add Angular routing. I will type yes and press enter. And to choose the style sheet format, I can choose any one, but I will keep CSS and press enter on that as well. It takes a few minutes for Angular CLI to create the Angular project. And once that is done, you can see a folder inside the Angular UI folder, and with all the files that Angular needs to run the project. So we will come back inside here, and I will open Visual Studio Code. That will be the code editor I'm going to use today to work with Angular. And for the .NET side of things, I will use Visual Studio. So I will browse one level deep to the newly created folder. So I will say cd full stack UI, and in this folder I want to run the Visual Studio Code editor. So I will say code space dot to start Visual Studio Code with this folder. So this is a handy little shortcut. I will just click on this trust, and I will say yes, I trust the authors because I have created this, and Visual Studio Code has opened up the Angular folder. And if you are familiar with Angular, these all files are just the same as the previous versions of Angular, and you have your main source folder over here and the application folder, in which the main file is your app.component.ts and the HTML file. The starting point of the Angular application is this index.html file, where you can see everything looks like a normal HTML, but you have this app root component or a new element, which is app root. Now, where is this component coming from? This is a component or a template which is defined in the app.component.ts. So if I open this, you can see the selector app root over here. And if we come back, we can match this element to the selector inside the app component.ts. So basically, when the index.html loads, everything after that is Angular components and Angular component HTML files. So when we start our application, this is the first component that gets loaded. So let's start Angular, and let's open this in a browser to see what we get out of the box. So to do that, I will open a new terminal over here. And once this is up, I will say ng serve --o to open this in a browser, and I will press enter. This usually takes a few minutes the first time you are trying to run the application, but otherwise it's really fast. Our Angular application has started, and if you look at it, it opens up in your default browser. And if it doesn't open up, it's usually on this location, which is localhost :4200. And in my default browser, it opens up and it opens this web page for us. It's basically a static page with some Angular helps and documentations and links to other websites. But we don't want that. We want something of our own. So we will go ahead and first clean up the application. So I'll come back to the Visual Studio Code, and all that HTML that you saw is inside the app.component.html. So I will open that, and if I minimize the terminal, you can see all the HTML that you saw in the browser over here is actually just static HTML written over here. So I will select all of it, but I will leave the router outlet tag over here. So I will select everything and I will unselect the router outlet because I need that to perform routing in my application. So router outlet is basically responsible for, showing different pages or different components to your app.component.html. So I will keep that and delete everything else from the app component.html. And with that, if I go back to the website, you can see we have a blank slate, so nothing is visible on here. So now we will go ahead and install Bootstrap so that we can use its components and style our application over here. To install Bootstrap in our Angular application, I will come to the Bootstrap 5 website, and this is the getting started page. So I will come over here and copy the CDN. This is the fastest way to start with Bootstrap. So our focus is mainly on the CRUD operations. So I'll copy this command and I will come back and I will open the index.html file. And after the link tag over here, we are within the head section. So I will paste the CSS and I will also paste the bundle JavaScript file. So I will copy that and paste that over here as well. So I have the CSS for Bootstrap and I have the JS for Bootstrap as well. So with that in place, we can start building our components. So I will first start with the header. To add navigation to our website, I will come back to Bootstrap's website and I will search for a navbar. And I will open the first page. And if I scroll down, you can have different types of navbars as shown over here. So I can just copy any one. I need a simple navigation bar with one nav link. So I can copy this and I can come back to Visual Studio Code. And inside my app.component.html, above the router outlet, I will paste this HTML. Now it looks intimidating because there's a lot of HTML, but we don't need all of it. We just need to change the navbar brand to call what our website name is. That is fullstack.ui. And that's the name of our website. We will come back to the href of this later on. And the second thing that we need is one nav item, which will be, a way for us to navigate within our website. So I can remove the rest of the nav items. And then I will change the nav item name to call employees. Now we are creating an application in which we can see employees and we can perform CRUD operations on employees. So this will act as a way for me to route back to employees so that I can see all the employees. And again, we will come to the href for this later on. And one more change that I want to make here is I want to make this instead of a container fluid, I want to make it as a container. So I'll save these changes and I will come back to my browser to see that I can see a top navigation bar over here. The color behind is a very light color, so I can change that as well. I can call this navbar dark and have a background of let's say BG dark or maybe black. Let's see how that looks like. So save that. It doesn't come up with anything, so maybe a BG dark. And save that. So now I can see we have a navigation menu over here with one nav link, which will be used later on. But let's start with creating our first component, and that will be the employees list. So over here we will create a new component and we will make sure the routing works for that. To create a new component, I will come back to my code editor And I will first create a folder inside application. So I'll click on this new folder icon and call this components. Inside components, I will have another folder called employees. And then to create a new component, I will open a terminal window. And first I have to browse to this employees folder. So I will write cd source, and then I will go to the app folder and then components, and finally the employees folder. So I am inside the employees folder, and to create a new component, I will write the command ng g for generate, c for component, and then I will give the name of the component, which will be employees-list, and press enter to create that component. The new component has been created and it is inside the employees list folder over here. So I can come back. Now we have to do something. So we have the employee list works. This is just a paragraph which is shown inside the component. But how do we see this component in this page over here, which is the home page? So for that, we will use Angular routing, and to add Angular routing, we will come back to the app.module.ts file over here. So I will open that and I will minimize this. We have the, sorry, we don't have to go to the app.module file. We have to go to the app-routing.module file. So I will come back over here, and as you can see, we have a const of routes defined, which is an empty array, but we will add a new object inside the routes. So I will open parentheses, and inside here it needs two things. One is the path, and that's of type string, and the other is the name of the component that we are going to load when we go to this path. So when we go to the home page, which is the empty path, we want to load the employee list component because we want to see the list of employees on the home page. So if the empty path or the home page is selected, we want to load the employee list component. So I will say employee list component, and that way when we open this path, this component is loaded. Let's see if that works. So I will save this and I will come back to the browser. This is refreshed, and you can see the router outlet is correctly loading the employee list component when the home page is selected. Now we want to do the same thing when the employees page is selected. So I will go ahead and add another route. So coming back here, and I will copy this and paste another object just below. And when I open the slash employees path, I want to open the same component. So I save this, and I want to make a change to the app.component HTML inside our header, where we had just a hash over in the nav item. We want to change this to go to slash employees. Now when the employees page is hit, the app employee list component is loaded as well. So I will go back to the browser. Now this is showing me an error because the routing cannot have the slash, the app routing module. So I will come over here and remove slash, save that, and refresh the application again. So our home page correctly shows the employee list component. And if I go to the employees page, and you can see the route changed and the employee list component has loaded as well. But you see there's a page refresh happening. Now Angular, we have created a spy application, so we shouldn't be expecting this. So instead of the href back inside my app component, I want to use the router outlet, sorry, the router link. And in here, I will specify slash employees page. So this will be just a router link without the parentheses because we are not passing any argument. So if I use that and come back, you can see if I hover over it, it shows the /employees page. So if I go to the employees, it works. And if I come back to the home page, it still loads the employee list component. So that's all working fine. We have the routing setup as well for the employees page. It's now time to work on the employee list to show the list of employees. So I will come back to my Visual Studio Code application and I can close this. Now I want to show the list of employees, but we don't have any employees at the moment. So we will just create a static list of employees till the time we have created our .NET application so that we can get the employees from the .NET application and from the database. So I will create a folder called models. I will create a folder called models in which I will have a model called employee. So I will have employee.model.ts and I will export interface employee. And this will have a few properties. So the first property will be a first name. So, or I can just call this name, and this will be of type string. And then I will have a property called email, which will be a string as well. Then I can have phone for the employee, and this will be of type integer or a number. And then I will have, let's say, a date of birth or a department or salary. So I'll have salary, which will be again a number. And then finally, I'll have a department, which will be of type string. And I have my employee model ready. So it's time to populate this statically and then show it on the home page. So I am inside the app list component.ts and in the ng on init, because when the component loads, I want to show a list of employees. So first of all, I will create that property. I will have a public property called employees, which will be of type employee array. So I'll take the employee from model, which will be of type array, and I will instantiate it with an empty array. After that, I will want to add to employees. So I will say this dot. So this dot employees dot push, and I can push a number of items in there. So let's first create employees, and we can basically instantiate our employees over here. So I will create the first object and the name of it. And I will quickly go ahead and create these. But before I do that, I want to create another property for the employee, and that will be the ID. So that will be a unique ID of type string. I will store it as GUIDs, which will be later on, but for the timing, I'll just give them 1, 2, 3 or different values. So I will go ahead and quickly create a list of employees, let's say about 3 or 4, and I will then push the employees. So I have created a list of employees and I have 3 employees over here. So I will push these. I don't even want to push these employees now because I have the list already. So what I can do is I can use this employee's public variable in the HTML. So I will come back to my employee lists HTML, and in here I can remove the paragraph, and I want to add a table so that I can loop over the employees that I have. And to create a table, I will come back to the Bootstrap website and search for table. But because I know how the table works, like it's only a class called table, I can come back to my code and start creating this. So I will have all of this inside a container. So div with the class of container, and that's a Bootstrap class as well. And I will give it a margin on the y-axis, so a margin y of 5, both top and bottom. So I will first add a heading, so that will be an h1 tag which will say employees, and after the h1 tag I will have a table, so a table, and that will have a class of table as well. And to the h1 tag, to create some separation, I will have a margin bottom of 3. Inside the table, I will first have the headings, so I will create a t head, and inside the t head I will have a t row which will have a few th columns, so that will be the headers. The first one would be ID, the second one would have name, the third one would have email, then we will have we had the salary and the phone, so phone, and the last one is salary. So we have the t head defined. Now it's time to create the body for this table, so t body, and the t body will actually come from the employees that we have, the static list that we have. So I will create a tr, and inside that I will have a few tds. So let's say we want 5 tds like this. The values of these tds would be coming from the employees, and we have to loop to create those 3 employees. So on the tr I will have an ng for loop, so I will say ng for, and I will say let employee of employees, and this variable name should match the variable name that I have over here, the public variable, and let employee of employees. And now we can use this employee field within curly braces like this and say employee.id, because the first column was ID. And similarly I'll have all of these variables. The second one would be name, then would be email, phone, and salary. And we only want to show this table if there is an employee in the employees list. So I'll say ng if the employees are defined, then show this table. Otherwise you can show this paragraph that says no employees found, and I will have an ng if on that as well. So ng if the employees are defined, then, or are not defined, then you can say no employees found. So to see this in action, I will come back to my browser, and we had 3 employees, so we are showing the list of 3 employees on our Angular website. And as you can see, it's populating all the details correctly, which is the ID, name, email, phone, and salary. Now in the case when we had no employees, let's try that scenario as well. So instead of that, I will just assign this to a new array and save it. And if I come back to the application, it refreshes. It doesn't show any employee, but it also doesn't show the message. So let's quickly check that. Now we wanted to show the table of employees. So employees is defined, but it's 0 in number. So we'll say this and employees dot length is greater than 0. Then show this table. And if employees are not defined, or the employees dot length is equal to 0 or less than 0, let's say less than equal to 0, then show this message. And I save this and come back to my application. It says no employees found. So our employees display or the list of employees that we want to see on the home page is working correctly, it's a good time to start working on our Angular project as well. Sorry, the .NET project, where we will create the API. So let's go ahead and create our .NET 6 Web API. To create our .NET 6 Web API, I will come back to the folder structure where I have the UI. So along with that, I will create another folder which I will call Full Stack API. And in this folder, I want to install create my .NET 6 Web API project. So I will open Visual Studio, and I have Visual Studio 2022. This is the latest at this video. So I will create a new project. So I will click on this button, and in here you can either search for it or you can scroll down to see ASP.NET Core Web API. This is the project that we want to create, and this is in C#. So I will select that and click next. From here, I will give it a location. So I will paste this path in which I want to create the .NET 6 API, and I will give it a project and solution name. So I will call this fullstack.api and click next. After that, it's asking us to select a framework. I will select .NET 6, which is the latest at the time of this video. And I will have all the other options as selected. So I will hit this button called create, and this will create the web API for us. So we have the .NET 6 web API created for us, and we have one controller, which is a default controller called weather forecast controller. And it shows a list of static values for weather forecast using this model. So we don't want to use that. We want to create our own controller, which can use entity framework to actually perform CRUD operations and create, read, delete, and update the list of our employees. So we want to create a new controller over here. But before we do that, we have a dependency. We want to use entity framework core. So we have to install some packages first. And to do that, I will come over here to dependencies. I will right click on it and go to manage NuGet packages. I want to search for two packages. One is entity framework core.SQL Server. So the full name is Microsoft.entityframework core.SQL Server. This is the second one. So I will select and install this package. And when this is installed, I will select, or I will search for another package called entity framework core.tools. I will search on that, and it's the first package over here. I will select that and click on install. We have installed entity framework now, and it's time to create a new model for us that we can perform CRUD operations on. So I will create a folder called models. And inside the models folder, I will create a new model or a class called employee. So I will call this employee.cs. And this will have a few properties. And if you remember from our Angular application, we had 5 properties. So we will have the same 5 properties over here as well. So I want to create a GUID of with the type of GUID, and the name would be ID. This will be our unique identifier for the employee. Then we want to have a property with the type of string, and the name of the property would be name. Similar to name, we will have a string property of the name of email. Then we will have 2 number properties, so 2 integers or a long for a number. So I will have long phone, and I will have, let's say, a long for salary as well. And the final field would be a type of string, and that will be department. And make sure your name matches the names of the properties that you have created in your Angular application. Now, if you are using .NET 6, you'll see these squigglies that says the property is nullable, or you have to, have a non-nullable value when exiting the constructor. This is because in the project, if we open the project properties, so I'll double click on this project file, and you can see nullable is enabled. And by default in .NET 6, we have nullable enabled all the time. So you can go ahead and disable this field, and you no longer would be receiving the squigglies over here. So I can close this now. And the next step that we want to do is to create a DB context. If you know how Entity Framework Core works, we have to create a DB context so that it can talk to our database. It can be a SQL Server database, or it can be a Postgres database, or whatever. But for that, we have to create a DB context, and I will create a new folder for that. I will click on add a new folder. I will call this data, and inside data, I will create a new class file, and I will call this full stack DB context. That's the name of our application, and then followed by the word DB context. This class would inherit from DB context. So I will write that and press Control dot. And I will use this library called Microsoft.Entity Framework Core, the one that we installed. So I'll import the using statement. And if I come back to this class and click on this, so now that it's highlighted, I will press Control dot and create a constructor with the options parameter, so that when we give options to our class, it also passes it to the base class. So we will create a constructor for that. And the only other thing required for our application is to create a property, and that property will be of type dbSet. And I'll explain that in just a moment. So I'll create a property first. So prop tab, and then this will be of type dbSet, of type employee, the one that we created inside our models. So I will press Control dot and import the models from the models folder. The name of the property would be employees, and this dbSet property is used to act as how we treat tables. So Entity Framework Core will look at this DB context, and it will create a new table called employees, and using this property, using this public property, we are then able to access that table and communicate with it. So with that, we have the DB context ready, and it's now time to create a connection string. Before we go ahead and create the connection string, I am using SQL Server to talk to my database, and the server, or the local server that I have installed in my machine, is called this. Yours could be totally different. So I'm copying the name and clicking on connect. At the moment, I don't have any database, so I'll create one from scratch. I will come back, and inside my app settings.json, I will have a new field defined, which will be connection strings. And inside the connection strings object, I will have a new key value pair, and the key name would be full stack connection string, or you can have any other name. And the value for this would be server is equal to the name that I copied. This is my server that I have installed. Yours could be totally different, followed by the database name. Now this database doesn't exist, so the name that you will mention here, Entity Framework Core will use that name and create a database for you. So I will call this full stack DB. And after that, we have to write trusted connection is equal to true. Trusted underscore connection is equal to true. And with that, our connection string has been defined. Now it is time to use dependency injection and inject the DB context inside our container. So I will open program.cs file, and before we build the builder, I will say builder.services.add db context. This db context is of type full stack db context, which we have over here. So I will mention the name full stack db context. I will import it from the data folder, which is this one. And after that, we have to pass some options. So I will say options such that I will come to the next line. Options dot, we want to use SQL Server as a database. So I will mention that use SQL Server, and I will press Control dot to import this using statement, Microsoft Entity Framework Core. And inside the use SQL Server method, I want to pass the connection string. So I will use the builder again, and I'll say builder dot configuration dot get connection string, and I will mention the name of the connection string I want to get, which is this one. So whatever name you have defined as your connection string, use that and paste it inside the method as a string. And now I can close this. So now our DB context is injected, and we can use this later on inside our controllers to talk to our SQL Server database using this DB context. Everything is now set up for us to create a database using Entity Framework Core. And to do that, I will come to Tools. I will open NuGet Package Manager and click on Package Manager console. Inside here, I will execute two commands. The first one will be add-migration. And after that, I can give the name of the migration. So after that, I'll put a space, and inside quotes, I will write the name of the migration. Because this is the first migration, I will call it initial migration. And I will press enter to create a new migration. So Entity Framework Core uses the package that we installed, the tools package that we installed, and it creates a migration for us. And if you see over here in just a second, we will have a new folder called migrations, which is here now. And if I expand on that, it's just a class file with everything that Entity Framework Core needs to create this new database and the new table called employees. So I'll close the class. And the second command that I want to execute is to actually create the update the migration. So if I come back to my SQL Server and refresh this, I don't have any database at the moment, but after running this command, which is update-database, and press enter, when this executes, we will actually see a new database created inside our SQL Server database. So this has successfully finished. And if I come back and refresh this, I can see a new database created, which is the full stack DB, the same name that we gave inside our app settings.json. If I expand this and under the tables, we can see this table employees created with the same columns that we had inside our entity or the domain model. So we have these, we have the table ready, we have the database ready. It's now time to create the controller action methods so that we can perform CRUD operations. So for that, I will create a new controller. To create a new controller, I will come to this folder, controllers, right click on it and add a new controller. And from here, I will choose MVC controller empty and click on the add button. Now I will mention the name of this controller. So with the controller suffix, I will write employees. So the full name would be employees controller.cs, and I will click on add. Now this is our controller and we have one action method over here, but we will change this soon. But before we even come to here, we want to specify the attribute API controller. to tell the .NET framework that this is an API controller and it won't be having any views, so we don't need the view over here. Now the first method we want to create is to get all the employees. Now I know our database doesn't have any employees, but we will still start from getting all the employees. So the first method will be an HTTP GET method. And I will also create a route for the controller. Now, when the user goes to a certain URL, then we want to tell our .NET application to come to this HTTP methods, or like the get or the add. So the route for the controller level would be /API/employees. You can either mention it using the full word called employees, or you can just use the controller name in square brackets. So I'll mention controller, and it will automatically take the name of the controller, which is employees, and it will map it inside the route. So you can mention it anyway. So now that we have defined the route, we will act on our method. So it's going to be an HTTP GET method, and we will call this get all employees. And to get all the employees, I will have the same route. So anybody who comes to this application /API/employees will get all the employees. So in here, I want to make use of the DB context and use entity framework to talk to our SQL Server database. So in here, I will create a constructor for this controller. So CTOR to create a constructor. And then inside the constructor, I will inject the DB context that I injected inside our services container, which is over here. So I will say full stack DB context control dot to import the using statements. And then I will give it a name. And then I will assign this to a local variable, and I can assign it to the same name, or some people prefer the underscore thing, so I can change it to underscore. So underscore full stack DB context, it's a private property, and we can use it inside our get all employees method now. So I will call the DB context dot, and we know we have a property called employees because we want to talk to the employees table. So I will mention employees. So that's a way to talk to our employees table. And we can return this as a list, but we want to make use of the asynchronous functionality. So I will turn this method into an async function by writing async and wrapping this iAction result inside a task. So this makes our function asynchronous, and we can use the employees dot to list async method. So we don't have that by default. So I'll come over here, click on it, and press control dot and import the dependencies, which is Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. And because we are using an async function, we want to await on it. So this will fetch all the list of employees that we have inside the employees table, and we can store this inside a variable. And once we have this inside the variable, we can return the list of employees in an OK response. So if you know, in an HTTP, in a RESTful world, we have the OK response, which is a status 200. And we can then pass the list of employees inside that OK response. And this will return the list of employees to our clients, which in this case is the Angular application. So we have one function defined. It's a good time to run this application to see if it's all working correctly or not. So we have started our application, and along with the weather forecast controller, we have also the employees controller, and we have this opening up in Swagger, which comes default in the latest versions of .NET. And that's very handy because now we don't have to use Postman to call our APIs. So inside the employees controller, we created a new method to get all the employees. So if a user comes to localhost 7211/API/employees, they should be able to get all the employees. So I will come over here, click on try it out, and click on execute. And it's making a connection to the database now. So it came back with a 200. And as I told earlier, 200 means a success response. But we came up with an empty list because we don't have any employees in our table employees inside a SQL Server database. So we will create a new method to add a new employee, and that way we can test this method again. So I will close this application and come back to my Visual Studio. And the next method we want to create is to add an employee. So this will be a post method, and I will start writing this method. So I will say public async task of type I action result. And then I will call the name of the method would be add employee. And inside the add employee method, we want to get something in the parameter because we want to have inputs from the user so that we can create this new employee. And for that, I will use the employee model that we created. And I can call this employee request. Now this is coming from body, so I can annotate that with the from body keyword. And when the employee request has data, we want to first create a new ID for this employee because we don't want to trust our Angular UI application to pass the ID. We want to create it ourselves. So I will have ID is equal to, and it's a GUID, so GUID.new GUID. And that way we always create a new ID for our employee. And after that, we want to use all the same values that this employee request has. So we will again use the DB context. So this dot employees, and we have the add method or the add async method. So we will use the add async method and pass the employee request that we are getting as a parameter to the DB context. And it says that we are using the add async method, so we want to put the await keyword in front of it. And this way we add a new employee using DB context, but we do have to save changes. So we will call the DB context again and call the save changes async method. And using that, we should be able to add a new employee. So if we do that, after that, we can return an OK response of this newly created employee. And by that way, we have this new add employee method ready. So it's a good time to test this as well. So I will run this application again. This time we want to test the post method, which is the add employee method. So I will expand this, click on try it out. And it gives me a new ID by default, but we don't want to pass any ID from the UI. So I will remove this and I will put some values in. So I'll say John Doe. I'll put some email, a phone number, and then some salary. And finally, the department. And if I execute, I want this to be created inside my database. If I scroll down, I see the 200 request, and I have the object, the employee that was created inside my database returned back to me. It has an ID field as well, and all the fields that we passed to it. Just to confirm, I will come back and I will do a select top 1000 rows. And as you can see, we have a new row created, which is the same details as we passed to our web API. So our add functionality is working. This is good progress, and we have created two methods inside our API, and that is the get all employees and the add employee method. So this is a good time to come back to our Angular application and make use of these two functions. So I will come back to my Angular application, and before we were using a static list, we don't want to use that anymore. We want to call our API and show the list of employees from the database. So I'll quickly go ahead and add a couple of more employees using the same API call, and then we will go ahead and fetch the employees from our Angular application. Now we want to make use of the Angular application and talk to our API. And to do that, we use services to call any external APIs. And to create a new service, I will first create a folder called service. So inside app, I will create a folder called services. And inside services, so if I come back and browse to services, cd services, I want to create a new service. So I will say nggs to create a new service, and then the name of the service would be employees, and press enter. So we have a new service created inside the services folder. So I will open employee.service.ts file, and in here I will create a new method which will be able to talk to our .NET 6 web API, and I will call this method get all employees. And to be able to talk to the external API, I need the HTTP client, and I will inject that over here. So I will say private HTTP, and that's of type HTTP client. Now for some reason the Visual Studio Code is not able to tell me where the library is. So either I have to import it manually, or I found this other technique online where you have to go to tsconfig, and over here at the end I can say type roots. So I will actually copy this and paste it over here. So you have to import these lines. So you'll say type roots, which is an array, and it has these three values: node modules /types, node modules /angular, and also node modules /angular /common /http. And that's the path where we want to get the HTTP client module from. So I will save the config file and close it, and I will wait for this to initialize. And once that is done, I will come over here again and press Control dot, and now I can import the library, which is the HTTP client module, from this file over here. And now we can use this HTTP private variable. So I will say this dot HTTP dot get, because that's the get method to get all the employees. And it needs, the first argument it needs is the URL. So let's first save the URL inside the environment file. So I will open my Swagger to copy the URL. So copy your URL and come back to the environments folder over here. And inside the environment.ts file, I will say this is the base API URL. And inside a string, I will paste the localhost URL. I'll save that, and I can close the environment file now. And I can directly use the environment file inside the service. So I'll create a variable here, which will be base API URL. And that'll be of type string and is equal to environment.base API URL. So we are getting the values from there, and we can use that inside our methods. So the way to get all the employees is by going to this URL after the base URL. So /API/employees. So I'll do the same thing over here. I'll use the base URL. So this dot base URL plus, and that's a string, /API/employees. And that's the full path to the get all employees. And because this is a get method and it returns an observable, we can return an observable from here, and that will be of type, this get method will be of type user. So employee. So I will say map this to the employee array object and then return this. And also I will add an observable type or return type of observable, and inside that I will pass the employee array. So our get all employees method is ready. It's now time to use it, and we have to use this from our app, from our employee list component. So I will go inside components and I will open employee list.component.ts file, and I can remove the static list of employees and replace that with an empty array. So if I save it and if I come back to my Angular UI, when it refreshes, you can see there's no employees found because we are not talking to our database at the moment. So we have our empty list here, and in the ng-oninit method, we will use the service. And the way to use the service is we'll have to inject that first. So private employees service, which is of type employees service. Now we have injected it and now we can use it. We'll say employee service, this dot employees service dot get all employees, which is the method that we created. And because this is an observable, we have to subscribe on it to make it to work. And we will say dot subscribe. Inside the subscribe method, I will call the response. So next, and I will have the employees coming back. And what I'll do is I'll first log these employees to the console. So console.log and then employees. And I could also log the error response. So error response such that, and I'll copy paste the line so that I can console log the response coming back as error. So with that, there's another change that we want to make, and that's injecting the HTTP client module so that we can actually make HTTP calls, and that's inside the app.module.ts file. In here, under the imports array, I will add the HTTP client module like that, and then save the changes. And if I come back to my application again, it shows no employees, but if I inspect and go to the console, it says that we are getting a course error. So we can see we have a cross origin request blocked. The same origin policy disallows reading the remote resource at our API with a status of 200. So all of that is because our browser disallows from this URL, which is 4200, to go to our API URL, which is 7211, because it's different URLs. Course policy disallows that. So what we want to do is we want the API to tell that who should consume our requests. So one change that we want to make inside our API is, I'll stop the application, is to come in the program.cs file and enable course. So there's a few ways you can enable course, and the quickest way would be to come over here and after app.https redirection, we will say app.use course, and we will pass a few options in here, which is this. So we'll say policy such that policy dot allow any header dot allow any method, and then allow any origin. So what that means is we are allowing any origin. That means we are also allowing our Angular application to talk to our API, and any method is allowed and any header is also allowed. So with those changes, I will start my application, the web API again, and let's try to consume the web API from the Angular application again. So make sure this is running, and I will come back, clear this console, and I'm just waiting for Swagger to open first. So Swagger has opened. I'll minimize that and I will refresh this page. And as you can see here, we got an array of 3 items, which are the employees that we want to show on our Angular application. And this is being returned from the .NET 6 Web API. So we are getting the response back. It's now a matter of mapping our response to the employees list and showing them on here. So I can close the console and come back to my Angular application. And I can close these 2 files. In here, where I am consoling the response, I want to show these employees to the employees list.html, and I will now populate this variable. So this dot employees, and I will take the values coming from the response. So this dot employees is equal to employees. And when I save changes, everything else remains the same because we were using a static list before. And if I now come back to my application, you can see 3 employees getting returned from the database. And if I select on this again, I'll show you we have 3 employees, and this might be different or this might be the same. I just use the same static data, but this time it's actually talking to our .NET API to talk to the database and getting the results back. If you remember, we also created the add method to add a new employee. So let's create a new page inside our Angular application, and maybe a button over here as well, or on the top nav, to go to that new page so that we can add the details to the new employee and call the API again. And to do that, I will first create a component. So I will expand this. I will open a new terminal, and I will browse to components first. So CD. So I will go to CD and then source app components. And then inside the employees folder, I want to create a new component. So I will write ngGC, and then the new component will be add-employee, and press enter to create that component. So the component has been created over here. So if I expand on components, we have 2 components now. The new one is the add employee. We want to add routing to this new employee component. And to do that, we will come back to app-routing.module.ts. And inside here, I will add another object. And I will say, when I go to this path, employees/add, I want to open the add employee component. So save that. We have a new path defined. So I will copy the URL, and we want to create a new URL inside our header. So for that, I will come back to the app component HTML. Here's our header over here, and I will create a new route. So I will say, I will copy this li, paste it over here, and then I can remove this. I will change the router link to say employees/add. I'll bring it to the second line, and the name of this link would also say add employee, or you can say add new employee. And with that change, I will come back to my browser, and you can see this new add employee button over here. If I click on it, it goes to the employees/add page, and you can also see the new component getting loaded. So it's now time to work on this add page. For that, I will come back to my Visual Studio Code browser window, and I will minimize this as well. And I want to open the HTML page for the add employee. I will first remove the paragraph and start with the container again. So div with the class of container. And I also want to add a margin on the y-axis and number 5, which is a big margin. And inside that, I will first add a heading, and that will say add new employee. I will give this a class of margin bottom of 3, I guess, maybe 2. I will just quickly check what I gave, which was 3. So I will give it 3 again. And after that, we want to create a form. So I will create a form. I will add the action later on. Inside the form, I want to add a few fields. So I will come back to Bootstrap to see how we can add a form, and I'll say forms. I will open this page, and we want a form similar to this. So I can actually just copy this one, the HTML, and come back to my code editor and paste it over here. So we have form already, so we can get rid of one form. And inside here, we can see the first is email address. We want to add a name first. So let's change this HTML. I want to add name. I can get rid of the for, and then it'll be an input of type text. The class is a Bootstrap class, so we will keep it, and we will change the ID to name, and we will give it to the for field as well. And I can actually remove this area described by field, and also this helper over here. So I will copy this, and I'll just remove the other two divs. So we only have one input and one button. I will save it to see how it looks like on the screen. So I'll come back to my application, and here it is. You can, if you want, you can decrease the size to, only show it halfway. And let's quickly do that as well. So div with the class of row, and inside the row, we will have div with the class of col 6, which is only 6 columns, and we will put the form inside over there. And if I save it, let's see if that works. Yep, it does. So we can only see the form till half of the width, which is 6 columns. So we have the input for name. There's a few other things we want. So I will copy this. We want email. So I'll change this to email. And then I will give it the ID of email and the type as well. So if I save it, I'll refresh this. I can see an email over here. And I will do the same thing for the next few input elements as well. So next we need is, I want to see what we need. So I'll go back and see phone, salary, and department. So I will first add phone number. So that will be with the label of phone, with an for field of phone and ID of phone as well. This will be of type number, so that the form restricts us to only add numbers. And I will copy this to create a salary input. And the ID of this input field will be salary, and it's again of type number. And the last one we need is of type text, and that will be the department. And that was our last input element. And finally, we need a submit button. and we can just call it submit or save. Let's call it save. And if I refresh it, this is the form that we want to fill, and the values of this form will go to our .NET Web API and then insert those details in the database. So it's now time to actually work on this form, and we will start by the form tag over here. I will give it a form tag, and then that will be ng form. And because we are using ng form over here, we want to add the forms module inside app.module.ts. So I will open that again, and inside the imports array, I will add forms module, press that and save it. And you can see the error is now gone. After that, I want to bind the input elements to a model inside the add_employee.component.ts file. So I will open that first, which is this file, and I will first create a new variable, a public variable, and I will call this add employee, or you can call it employee or add employee request, and that is of type employee. And we want to instantiate it as well. So we will give ID of blank, and then name of blank as well. So we will define all the properties. Then was the email. We will have the phone as 0, and then the salary as a default of 0 as well, and finally the department of empty. And we will use this to bind this variable to our form, and for that we make use of the data binding technique in Angular, and we use the braces, and we specify ng model is equal to, and in strings we say the variable dot the property that we want to bind. So this is the name property, so we will say this dot name, and along with that we also have to specify the name attribute. So name is equal to name. So I will bring this to the second line. So we added two fields, two properties, which is the ng model and the name property. We will do the same for all the other input elements as well. So name for the email would be email, and then ng model would be this dot email. Similar thing for the phone as well. So I'll bring this to the second line, and I will have a name attribute of phone, and then ng model would be request dot phone. After that, we will have the same for the salary, and then the last one would be the department. So we will have department as the name and this dot department. So we have our input elements properly binded inside the form. We want to say when the form is submitted, we want to talk to an action inside the TypeScript file. So here we will say on submit, which is ng submit, we want to call the add method. So let's say add employee method. So we want to call this method, but this method doesn't exist. So we want to create it. I will come back to the TypeScript file, and after the ng onInit method, I will define this method. And when this method is hit, this variable will be populated. So I'll log this to the console first to see if its values are coming properly or not from the form. So I have this logged to the console and saved it. And if I come back, this is getting refreshed. I will open the console again. I will start with the form first. So I'll just mention my name again. And just before I save it, I'll just clean this and save it. So you can see the object getting populated and with all the values for department, email, name, phone, and salary. We don't want to fill the ID because that's the job of the API, to fill the ID for the add employee. So we have this form working. It's now time to create a service method so that we can pass the values from this form to the service, which will then talk to our API. So I will open the service now. Open employee.service.ts and create a new method called add employee. This takes a parameter, which is employee, or add employee request, and that will be of type employee. And inside the method, I will use the HTTP library again to call the post method because it's an add functionality. According to RESTful APIs, that should be the post method. So inside the post method, the first argument is the URL again. And if I show you in Swagger, the post method also follows the same URL as the get method. So localhost 7211/API/employees. So I can actually copy the URL from the above method, paste it over here, and then it needs the second method, which is the body. And we have the body being passed, which is the add employee request. So I will actually pass the request inside the HTTP post method. Now we know that this returns the added employee back. So as a mapping parameter, we will map this to an employee and we will return it. And we also want to define a return type, which will be of type observable and employee. So our add method is now ready in the service and ready to be consumed from the component. So I will come back to this component and call this service from here, but it doesn't have any service. So I'll inject that first. So private employee service is of type employee service. And I will say this dot employee service dot add employee, and this receives this parameter which is coming from the form, and I'll say this dot pass the request to the service. And because this is an observable, again we need to subscribe to it before we can actually trigger it. So in the subscription we will have the next, we will have the employee, the added employee coming back as a response. So we can actually console log the employee. So this will be employee over here. And you can also show the error message in a similar fashion as we did before. So I'll save this and I will try to fill the form again. Let's say James D, james.d@email.com. The phone number is any phone number and some salary. And the department is IT. And if I save this now, at the moment we only have 3 employees. So let's save that. We should get something in the console. I can't see anything in the console. I'll just go on and confirm by clicking over here, execute. So it did not happen. So nothing happened, and we can't see anything over here as well. So let's see why. When this function is called, this.employeeService.addEmployee, and let's see if that is working fine. It's a post method and it's going to the base URL /employees, and this is the body that we want to pass. So this looks to be okay. I will just do it one more time after the refresh. So I'll refresh this again, and I'll clear this before. So this will be James D. The email is that, some phone number, and some salary. Department is IT. So before I click console, just clear it and save this. So it's giving me a 400 error because it says, I'll have to read the error first. It says one or more validation errors occurred. And if I see the JSON value could not be converted to a system.GUID because it was expecting the ID to be a GUID, but then we weren't returning any ID because we don't have any ID. So as a fix for that, we can just return an empty GUID. So before we send this request to the service, to the web API, we will come over here and say add employee request.id, and we will override it with an empty GUID, which is all zeros. So if you search for an empty GUID, you'll get this value. And it's basically, we'll override this value anyway in the API. And this is only for demonstration purposes. So we'll do that and then try to call the API again. So refresh it. I'll just go back to my add employee page, and here I will enter the values again. And this time when I save it, I should get a success response back, which is nice. I'm getting the object back of the newly created employee, and as you can see, we have the ID generated for that as well. If I come back, I'll show you. If I execute this query again, we have another employee added, and our CRUD operations, which is getting all the employees and creating a new employee, is working correctly now. Now we want to do a smart thing over here. When this is successful, we should be redirected back to the employees page, and to do that, I will come back to my application, and inside the add employee component, where I'm just consoling it, rather than consoling it, when this is a success response, I want to navigate back to the employee list. So to do that, I need a router, and I will create another private variable called router, and that is of type router. So I'll import that, and now I can use router. So I'll say this dot router dot navigate, and then we pass the link back to the employees. So employees, and this needs to be inside brackets. So inside brackets, we'll say navigate to employees. So save that, and let's test this by going back to our application and refresh it. I'll just make another entry. So let's say just a quick one, and save it. And on save, you can see it got redirected back to the employees page, and because the employees component was re-rendered, we also got the new employee that got added with all its details. So this is working quite nicely. The next step is to actually view an employee by maybe having a view button over here, from which we can actually view the employee details and also able to edit and delete that employee. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create a new component, let's say the edit component, and populate the details of this employee or any employee that we click on. So we will go back to our application, and we want to create a new component first. So I'll expand this, and I am inside employees, so I'm in the correct folder. I will say ngGC to create a new component, and then the name of the component would be edit employee, and press enter to create that component. So we have created a new component over here, And the first thing we want to do is to add routing for this component. So again, I'll just close the existing files and open app routing module. And in here, I want to specify another route that says when I go to edit slash, I want to pass the ID. So I want to get the ID from the list of employees and dynamically pass it as a route param. So I'll say :id, and then on this path I want to load the edit employee component. So edit employee component, and our routing has been defined. So I want to now add a link inside my table, which is in the employee list. So I will open the HTML file and I will add two things. One will be, I'm also missing the department. So let's add the department really quickly. So department, which is the header, and department as another TD. And the next thing I want to add is that view button that I was talking about. So I will add a header, which can be just a space because I don't want to have any name for the header. And as a value for that row or the column, I want to have an anchor tag. So an anchor element which has a router link, and the router link, the name of the element can be just view, to view the employee. And this time I will pass the router link in square brackets. And then as an array, I will pass two things. One will be the word edit, because it has to go to /employees/edit. So before that, I'll say employees, or it's just employee, I guess. Let's quickly check our routing again. So yeah, it is employees with an S. So employees, comma, the next one will be edit, and the final root value would be the employee.id. So I will pass employee.id in the router link as well, and I've saved that. And to show you what I mean, I will come back to my application, and we have a new button called view. And if I hover over the view button, you can see on the bottom left side of the screen, you can see the link that is going to localhost 400/2200/employees/employees. So we have an extra employees over there, which we want to remove. So I will come back and I want to specify this like with a dash. So refresh the application again, and now it's going to the /employees and it's not going to one level down. So we have the anchor elements defined, and by clicking on this, it opens the edit employee component. So our routing for this new component is now working, and it's showing the ID in the path as well. What we will do is on the page load, we will try to get this ID, and we will call our API to get the details for this employee. So let's do that. And first I will add some HTML. I will come back to my code, and I can close this and open the edit employee HTML. I don't need the paragraph. So I'll start with div.container, and actually I can just use the same HTML as we had for the add employee. So copy all of it, and we might have to make some minor changes. On the top, I'll say edit employee. And after that, I will remove the ng on submit method from here at the moment. We want to display the name. We also want to display the ID before this. So I will copy this, and before the name, I will have another div with the label of ID. And the ID is ID, and the name is ID. This is a text, and let's make this a read only. And for the ng model, we don't have this at the moment. We'll come back to this later on, but we need name, email, phone, salary, department, etc. And we'll have a save button at the end, which will trigger the form to save our employee. The next thing we will do is we will come to our edit employee component.ts, and we will try to read the value of the ID that we are passing in the route inside the ng onInit method. So for that, we need to inject activated route. And for that, I will say private route is of type activated route. And now we can use this private field. So I'll say this dot route dot param map, and this is an observable, so we will subscribe on it. And inside the subscription, we will say next. So when we get the response, so that's the params, we get all the params in the response, and we will consume the params. So we'll say params dot get, and we want to get the params with the ID, with the name of ID, and that's the same name that we defined inside our routing module, which is ID. So we want to get the same name. So inside strings, I'll mention ID, and I will save this to a constant. By using this ID, I will first check if ID is not undefined. I want to call the API. Now I want to call the API to get all the information on this employee with ID of this. But we don't have any function at the moment that does that. So let's create a function. I will come back to my API and create a new method over here. That will be an HTTP GET method as well. And I will also define the route. The route will be an ID inside curly braces. And to make it type safe, I will assign the keyword GUID with it. And after that, I will start my method. Task of type iAction result. Get employee. That is the name of my method. And as the parameter to this method, I want to use this ID that is coming in the route. So I will say GUID ID, and this would match, the name should match over here. And just to make it more descriptive, I will say this is coming from the route. Now we can use this ID to query our database, and you know how to query the database using the DB context dot. I will go to the employees table dot first or default async. I'll use the async version of this x such that x dot id is equal to id, and I will save this inside a variable. And because this is an async method, I will use the await keyword. So I will say var employee is equal to this. Once we have the employee, this could be an employee that is null because the ID doesn't exist. So the values coming back is null. So we will check first if employee is equal to null. Then we return a not found error back. Otherwise, we return the same OK response, and we also pass the employee details back. And that finishes our method. It's now time to consume it. So I'll first start the API, and I will come back to my Angular application. And to call an API, we want to use it from the service. So I will create a method inside the service first. I will name this method getEmployee. So this is my Swagger running. So I have that behind the scene. So getEmployee. And I will use the HTTP client again. So this dot HTTP dot get. And I want to go to a similar URL, but I want to also pass the ID to it. So slash, I want to pass the ID that is coming inside this method is of type string. So I want to pass the ID as well, and when, sorry, not as a comma, as a plus. And when this returns, I want to map this to an employee object. So return this, and also give the return type to this method. It's always a good practice. This is of type observable, and it's returning an employee. Save that, and our service method is ready. It's now time to consume this method from the component. So I will call the service from here, and to do that I have to inject it. Private employee service is of type employee service, and I can use this employee service over here inside the if condition. This dot employee service dot get single employee, it needs an ID, and we have the ID available to us. And to invoke this, we have to subscribe on it, and let's use the next property, and it returns a response, and we will assign this response to a local variable. So I will create a local variable, a public variable called employee details, that will be of type employee, and we have to give some default values to it, which I can copy from the add employee component from here to save some time. And if I paste it, it's happy, and I will assign this from the response. So this dot employee details, and assign the values from the response to this one. So we have this ready. We just have to fix the HTML because we have to bind the values from that local variable now, which is called employee details. So we will change the ng model from add employee request to employee details. And this should be ID. So save that, and everything should be working successfully. Let's quickly check. If I return, this is trying to load again, and nothing happened. And now it happens because it takes some time to talk to the API. So if I come back to the employees page and I try to view any employee, let's say James D, and if I view it, you can see the values getting populated inside the form correctly. Now that we have the form populated correctly, it's now time to work on the edit functionality or the update functionality. So using the save button should trigger a method call to update the API, and let's quickly add the method. So on the form, we will say when the form is submitted, so on submit, we want to call the update employee method, and we don't have the method at the moment, so let's create that. Inside the component, I will minimize ng on in it and create this new method over here, and the values of the employee will be coming from here. And let's create the service, and even before that, we don't even have the API call for it, so let's create the API call first. So I'll stop this and create the put method, which is update. So http put method, and the route for that would be similar to the get because it's acting on a single employee. Public async task of type iActionResult, and this method will be called update employee. This actually takes two things. One is the ID from the route, so I can copy this from here, and it also takes the employee object that we want to update. So update, so that's the employee object, and the name is update employee request. And if I come back over here, now we want to first search on this employee, and we can do that by calling the employees table from the DB context. I can use the find async method as well, and I can pass the primary key, which is the ID, to it, and this should return an employee. If I name it correctly. And now we can first check if employee is equal to null. That means the employee was not found. We will return a not found method error back. And if it was found, then we need to update it. So we don't want to update the ID, but we want to update this employee from the request. So name is updated from the request dot name, and similarly we also update the other values like email, salary, phone, and department. So I'll just quickly change this request to take the values from its respective properties. And once we have the update done, we want to call save changes async to actually save this to the database. And when the save has been performed, we will return an OK response with the updated employee. And that finishes our update method as well. And let's use that. So I will run the API again and come back to my Angular application. Inside the service, I need a new method. So I will call this method delete employee. And here's my Swagger running. So delete employee. This takes, sorry, not the delete employee. We want to update employee first. And update employee takes two parameters. One is an ID of type string, and the other one is the update employee request, and that is of type employee. And using the HTTP client, I can call the put method on this URL. The URL is the same as the get method as we saw in the route. So I can put it over here. And then it also needs a body, which is the updated employee request. So I can pass it over here like this. And as a result, I want to map this back to an employee. And finally, return this. And I will also add the return type of this method, which is observable of type employee. So we have the update employee method ready as well. Let's consume that from the edit employee component. And inside here, I can call the service. So employee service dot update employee method. It needs two things. One is the ID, which can be taken from here. So employee details dot ID, comma, and employee details itself. It's throwing me an error. Let's see why. So it's saying cannot find employee details. Oh, I have to say this dot employee details and this dot employee details, its object. So it's a constant thing. When you switch between Angular and ASP.NET, you just forget the keywords over here. So when you call this method, you want to invoke it using the subscribe method. And inside here, on the next property, when we have the response coming back, if this is a success response, we want to send this back to the employees list, and how we did in the add component.ts. So I'll just copy this router navigate functionality, paste that here. We don't have router at the moment, so I will also copy the injection from the constructor. So I will say I will go to the add functionality and I will copy the router over here and I will add this to the constructor. And when you add it, you also have to import it. So using the router, I will return back to the employees page if the call is successful. So it's now time to see if it's all working correctly or not. This is the employee, let's say James D, but we want to make it James C. And we change the email, also the phone number to something like this. Let's say I've increased the salary to 90K and the department remains the same. So if I hit save, it goes back to the employees list and James D now becomes James C. All these values are coming back from the DB. So no matter how many times I refresh it, it stays the same. And also the table in our SQL Server database also changes. So we have implemented the CRUD operations. It's just one left. We haven't implemented the delete at the moment. So let's quickly do that as well. So when we are inside the form, we also want another method or another button over here that calls the delete method. But before we do that, let's first add the API call for it. So I'll stop the application and I will create the delete method. The keyword for that is HTTP delete, and the route will be the same as the put method because we want to act on a single employee. So we want the ID for that employee. I will start creating the method. We will call it delete employee. And the ID property would be coming from the route. So I will copy that from the previous method as well. And we just need the route. So we will say if the employee is found in the database by going to DB context, tables, find async. If the employee is not found, so let's say if employee is null, then return a not found. And if it was found, we want to remove it. So we will call the context employees dot remove function and we pass the employee to it. So we want to remove this employee. So we will call that and then we will call the save changes. So don't forget to call save changes whenever you talk to the context. And finally, you can return an OK response, nobody, or you can pass the deleted employee back if you want to show any details of that employee. It's up to you. We have this ready. So I will start the API again. And in the meantime, I can come back to the Angular application. So I will minimize this first. And inside the service, we need another method which will work with the API to delete the employee. So I will create a delete employee method. And this takes an ID, which is of type string, and returns an observable of type employee. And I will start my function. I will use the HTTP client again to delete, and it goes to this URL with the ID of the employee to delete, and just that. And I can map the response, which is an employee, and return the result back. So it's as simple as you see. All of these follow a similar pattern. Now we have created the method in the service. It's now time to consume it. So inside the edit component, we will create another method called delete employee, which takes an ID, and this is of type string. and we will use the employee service to call the delete method and pass the ID to it. But we can only invoke this once we call the subscribe method. And inside the subscribe method, when we have the success response back, we want to navigate back to the employees page because there's nothing to show. So we will navigate back to the employees page. And now we have to call this from the HTML and also pass this ID. So I will add another button over here, and the type would not be submit because we don't want to submit the form this time. It will only be a button and not a submit type. And we can call this danger to show it as a red button, and we'll have the text of delete over there. So let's see if it's actually showing up correctly or not. I can see my Swagger didn't load correctly, so there was something wrong in the API. So let's see why that happened. I was actually looking at a different window. If I refresh it, it just refreshes fine. So no panic over there. I will come back, and we wanted to see the delete button. So we have the delete button. They are just sitting very close to each other, which I don't like. So I will put a margin right of 5 to the save button, and that will push the delete button to the side, which it doesn't. But yeah, we can have a look at that later on. But on the delete button, I want an on click event. So I will say I will have a click event, and then on click I want to call this delete employee method in the component and also pass the ID. So the ID of the employee that we want to delete. So this dot ID. I will bring this to the second line. And as you can see on the click event, I'm calling this method with the ID as well. So I will save this, and let's see if we can delete this employee. So we have the employee details loaded. If I click this button, we should navigate back to the employees page, which it does, and it also deletes that employee. Just to prove that again, I will delete this employee and click on that, and it deletes that employee as well. I loved creating this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed that as well. I hope it gives you a good understanding of how CRUD operations work in both Angular and ASP.NET. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you see more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.